Living with lupus can be isolating, especially as it is generally referred to as an invisible disease. Lupus can affect anyone at any time in their lives, and as such, it is our hope to bring awareness and inclusivity to lupus. As part of our Recognizing Men Living with Lupus campaign during Men's Health Awareness Month in June, Lupus Canada had the opportunity to speak with 4 men about their lived experiences with lupus. In this roundtable, we addressed how lupus impacts family, work, and academic life, their journey to diagnosis, and what advice they have for men newly diagnosed with lupus.
Hello, everyone. I'm Isaac. I'm the youth ambassador for Lupus Canada, and I was diagnosed officially in 2011.
I'm Kerry Johnson, and I have served on the board for Lupus Canada, which I was very happy to do. I was diagnosed 50 years ago in 1973. So anyway, so I've lived the young life, I've lived the old, the young adult life, the middle-aged life, the old life now, and going into retirement. So had lots of experiences that I'm more than happy to share.
Hi everyone, Miguel Jones. I was diagnosed when I was in grade 8. I always have to look up the age, so it's like 13 or 14 years old. So about 12 years ago, 12, 13 years ago.
Hi, my name is Carlos. I'm originally from El Salvador, living in Canada since almost 8 years ago. I was diagnosed with lupus not long ago. It was in 2018 when I was finally diagnosed.
How does your lupus impact your work or academic life? So for you, for your work life, and are there any activities that you had to reduce or give up as a result of your lupus?
I guess I'm a little bit of an anomaly in terms of the male, the idea of maleness. I wasn't into sports, and so I didn't have to give up a lot of that. I wasn't an outdoors person, so I really didn't have to give up that, except the year that I was diagnosed was the year that I decided I was going to get a suntan. So I was laying outside the pool and everything, so I'm sure that everybody can imagine what that did, and probably was the trigger for my disease. Over the years, I didn't have any major organ involvement, and a lot of times the disease itself was more truly systemic. And so when I had problems, it was more along the lines of general fatigue, rashes showing up, and that, which really didn't stop me. But I had to manage my time, manage the stress levels, manage those types of things. And more recently, during COVID, I had to go. I'm a professor, or was a professor at one of the universities in the Toronto area, and I had to go on to a health accommodation to avoid the COVID exposure, being immunosuppressed. So that was fortunately my dean. I work in the Faculty of Health Sciences, and so the dean and the other faculty were quite aware of that. But more for me, it was learning how to pace myself so that I wouldn't send myself into a flare and wear myself down, so that I could keep working and could keep going to school, because I did a lot of my schooling while I was working full time.
Yeah, that's true. I remember that. Isaac, when we talk about academic life, you're in your second year, is it at McGill?
Yeah, I just finished my second year.
Yeah. So, oh my God, you're going into your third already?
I know.
Wow. Time flies. Life. How did you find your lupus impacted that? And did you find any activities that you had to reduce or give up because of lupus?
So Kerry had a lot of good points. A lot of the disease I find is just managing it so that you don't go into flares, and that's a lot of just daily maintenance and taking your meds, and making sure that you're not exposed to the sun directly. All these type of things to try and avoid crossing the bridge over into a flare, because when that happens, oftentimes for me, I'd get severe symptoms like vasculitis or muscle soreness where I wasn't able to move at all, and that totally derails everything. So the program I'm studying is very rigorous, and I knew going in that that experience, more stress and more pressure than I've ever felt before. So
Hmm.
I knew that that in itself may trigger something and will kind of push me to my limits health wise. So for me, it was a lot of, just doing everything that I could to stay healthy in terms of supplementation, being active. So in the stage that I'm in now, I wouldn't say that it really limited me because I was so used to, putting these things into practice and I was in
Hmm.
prevention mode. When I was younger, through the diagnosis process, through those years of school, I was in and out of the hospital all the time because we weren't really sure with doses or what even was going on. So I definitely experienced more limitation in terms of sports because I was a competitive swimmer back then, and academics with missing so much school. But now I'm grateful to be in the stage where, I have laid out for me what I need to stay
Hmm.
healthy, and I just have to
Hmm.
stick to that. And if I start to see some effects, I have to take a step back from
Yeah.
the craziness of life and take care of that.
Yeah. How about you, Miguel? Did you find that lupus has impacted your work or your earlier academic life, and how did that impact you?
Um, it sounds very similar. My story kind of sounds a little bit similar to Carrie's or Isaac, what he just said, but how I had it really rough when I was younger, where I did have to miss a lot.
Hmm.
Definitely during like from grade 5 to like grade 9 was probably the worst it's ever been for me
Yeah.
in terms of like I remember I used to play soccer and I wasn't allowed to head the ball because I had platelet problems and I didn't want
Uh,
anything to touch my head. So like
yeah.
adjustments like that I had to do. I had to give up. Like I remember having to miss sport because my blood counts weren't high enough and stuff like that. But I'm very lucky where I am managing it since probably since I was like 20 years old now. So it's been pretty good where I haven't had major problems with my blood.
Hmm.
But I guess from an academic standpoint, when I only graduated 2 years ago, so that was a lot of. I think the stress was a lot for me then.
Yeah.
I was just always stressed out, and I knew what I was doing to my body, but I couldn't. I didn't know how to get through school without being somewhat stressed. So I guess I had to take the time I needed. And a lot of things that I had to do then was I did miss out because I was so stressed out in school, but I need to get through school.
Yeah.
So that kind of meant I guess back to your question about managing. Then it was stressful. I always had to take care of myself. So I had to miss out on stuff because of that, because I had to eat better than everyone else. I had to maintain a certain physical fitness level to keep healthy.
Hmm.
Sleeping, that's my big thing. I have to sleep a lot. Like I'm always napping. So, um,
You know,
uh,
it's
yeah,
listening to your body, right? Like,
yeah,
and which when you're younger, you don't know necessarily how to do that. As both Miguel and Isaac have said, when they're really young, it was probably the worst because going through the journey of diagnosis and getting on the right meds and what's going to work with your body, and starting as you move through with the disease, you learn to listen to that your body and say, I have to be careful. I have to be cautious because there's certain things I can't do because I need to ensure that I, try not to go into a flare.
yeah.
Carlos, now it sounds like not too long ago were diagnosed, if I heard that correctly. So how have you found this to affect your life or your work life?
Well, I think the challenging part is I'm still kind of new in being diagnosed. 4 years seems like a lot, but lupus is so extensive and it comes in a variety of different symptoms, and I'm still experiencing um, new symptoms, but definitely it affected my job. And and probably the part that was most challenging was while I wasn't diagnosed yet, and feeling that not being able to perform as I did, and being involved in the sport industry, you can imagine it's a very hectic world. I work for a professional basketball team, and so it's always running around and not performing according to my own standards was a shock for me.
Yeah.
And after I was diagnosed, of course, just in my case, the extreme fatigue, the disorientation, throughout these 4 years, had in some way developed some guilty feeling within the organization, because I always have to excuse myself, and knowing that I cannot take time off all the time, or not being able to take time when my work is needed, probably is very difficult. And I am fortunate to work for an organization that has supported me. They have given me flexible hours. I'm working from home, but sometimes it's required for me to be present at the job, right? So basically, that I think I'm still adapting to the illness, and still learning how to communicate what I'm going through.
Yeah.
That's probably what has most affected it. And in terms of reducing or giving up some of the things I did in the past, not so much physically, although it's also difficult for me to take walks with the family, or even a job, running around the venue. It's challenging, but probably mentally performing, that's been a big challenge. The cloudy mind, like putting together reports, and sometimes you don't feel like working. That's probably the best or the worst part for me.
Yeah.
Actually, something I was thinking about when Miguel was speaking was, I know that you used to do, I don't know if you still do a lot of running. So like, how was that something you've always done, or did you have to sort of give that up a little bit? Or like, what was that like?
The running was it was exciting at first. I started off on a high, and the goal was 16 kilometers. That was the run that, like in Newfoundland, we have like the Tele 10, which is 10 miles, and 16 kilometers is like the goal. I think I made it to 10 pretty easily, but then when I started pushing towards like the 10 to 16 mark to get there, that's when like I felt my body like rejecting it.
I feel my body at 0.1 mile.
Yeah, that's probably long and short of it. All the symptoms kind of started being a bit aggravated. Joints were like, my knees started hurting, and my back was always bad, and my back started hurting. So yeah, that's pretty much how it was feeling. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, any person has to prep like a lot for, long distance and with the sun in general and everything. So yeah. I was just wondering, how you,
So that was the sun as well was really tough, because I started training early because the run was in August or July. I started in January to give me enough time. But the thing is, in January, it's really cool out and really like you can start inside, and then when you hit the spring, it's really cool. But when it starts getting warm, that's another month. Then yeah, obviously, lupus and the sun was not great. So yeah.
So our next question is, how does lupus impact your family and home life? So I guess we'll start off with Carrie again.
So like many of us on this call, I was diagnosed at 13, 14 years old, I guess, 14. I was blessed with a very supportive family. Fortunately, we lived a block from the hospital where I was admitted for the first, and again, as the others have said, the first few years is horrible because you were in and out of hospital. I think grade 9, when I was diagnosed, I missed 3 months of grade 9, just school, just being in hospital, and then in the hospital for 2 months after that. So fortunately, we were close enough to the hospital, but I was the oldest of the 3 of us kids, and so it was hard on my sister and younger brother because they didn't understand. They were of such an age that they really weren't understanding what was going on. And of course, back then there wasn't a heck of a lot known about lupus. I think the fact that I was diagnosed, in some ways was a bit of a fluke. Well, in the let me back that up. It wasn't a fluke. It was the symptoms came on so severely and suddenly that, as far as the pediatrician, that was looking after me at the hospital was concerned, that there was no question that this was what it was. And they had the consultants come in from sick kids and other places in the city because I was too sick to be sent anywhere. So, but a very supportive family. One thing, as I got older, of course, I've lived many years and gone through a number of things, was when you're dating, trying to get somebody that you're dating to understand where you're coming from, what the challenges are. And again, fortunately, a lot of the ladies that I dated were in the church community, and so they were probably a little bit more understanding than others were, and that kind of stuff. But my wife Heather also had a dad who had, or her dad had diabetes and other chronic conditions, so she understood the whole chronic illness thing. So that was, so it was funny. Before we were married, I insisted that she come with me and talk to my rheumatologist. So we sat down in the office, and that was before paper records. Electronic records. And he plopped the chart down like this. I've been seeing the same rheumatologist for 35 years. So he had all the dirt on me. And fortunately, everything that I had told her is exactly what he told her, so about the disease and my condition. And so, there's been ups and downs with it through our marriage, even. And a big conversation we had to have was, do we or do we not have kids? Because what will that do to me, and what will that do, in terms of flares? And then if she's looking after kids and me, and it was a bit of a tough decision, although we came to the conclusion very quickly, that it might be best if we don't. Just for a variety of reasons. Anyway, so there's all these things that a lot of people just take for granted, that with a chronic disease, no matter what it is, you've got to take into consideration, and that there may be highs and there may be lows. And I think my mom and dad told her that, right after we were married, I had one of the worst flares that I'd had in many, many years. And we couldn't figure it out because I couldn't figure out why what would have triggered it. And my GP at the time said, well, happy stress is still stress. So that kind of thing can still set you off, even if it is. So it's critical that your family, and particularly a future partner, understand what the disease is about. Have them talk to your clinicians. There are some tough decisions to be made about how you're gonna plan your life together.
Yeah.
Sure. Thank you for sharing, Isaac. How does lupus impact your family and home life?
Sure. So I was also blessed with a very supportive family, especially during the stages of diagnosis, because it took so long. Obviously I was very young, and both my parents and even my brother, they didn't miss a single appointment. They're always there with me, talking to the doctors, helping me through it. And, they, even though I was evidently physically limited in what I was doing because I was missing school and sports and everything, they helped me believe that I could still do and accomplish anything anyone else could. And that really helped me because it can be really difficult mentally, especially when you're young and all your peers don't really understand what's going on. And because of that, they may just ignore you or not include you. So stuff like that can be difficult. And
Yeah.
that's why it's really important to have a strong family unit. And I was really blessed to have that. And then after the diagnosis, you know, also I should add my mom has lupus. So, once I was into that managing stage, I kind of had someone close to me that I was able to relate to. Um, Thankfully, she also has been in remission for a very long time. But, in terms of medications and managing and sun protection, it was both her and I. And so even, my family's always been close to me, but even within my family, I had my mom there to, support me through it. And I could really talk about it because we both have the same disease. So I was definitely blessed to have those supports. And even my brother, I know it was mentioned about younger siblings not really understanding what was going on, and it must have been scary to have his older brother be in the hospital so much and us not really have answers for so many years. But he was always there for me and was always my friend in supporting me. So I'm definitely very grateful for that. And I often think about, everything my family went through while I was sick, because it's not only me, it's everyone around you that has to endure the symptoms of a disease like this, especially when you have a tight family unit. So I'm grateful for my family experience.
Something that came up for me. Oh, sorry, Leanne.
Sorry, I was on mute. Sorry about that. I wanted to say I've had the pleasure of meeting and speaking with Carrie's wife and speaking with Isaac's mom and brother on numerous occasions. And you both have a great support system, great families, and it is very important. Absolutely.
Something I just thought of when you briefly spoke about, your peers is, I was talking to Leanne about one of my friends who lives with lupus, and, I didn't know at the time when I met her that she had lupus. So after the fact, a lot of things made sense to me when we were in high school, certain, the sun and everything. But when I was with her, we were out in the sun together and everything, and I could see her getting uncomfortable. We were with a group of people, and so I made the comment like, "Oh, guys, let's all like move to the shade and whatever." But it was interesting to me, and I was telling Leanne how even at this age, she was a little bit uncomfortable, like voicing that and communicating that need to the group of people. So this isn't really the question, so sorry, Leanne, I'm gonna gear off a little bit, but do you, Isaac, find it difficult to communicate with your peers about how you need to take care of yourself, or do your peers kind of know what lupus is and how you have to take care of yourself?
Okay, so yeah, that's a good question. So when I was younger, definitely like grade school, um, I've always tried to communicate, and my parents always told me that was best to try to communicate. And when you when I was younger, I was forced to maybe like mature quicker than my peers because of everything I was going through. So when I was in those younger stages, they would resort to just making fun of me for being allergic to the sun or something. But entering university, for example, I kind of continued what I've always done, to just be direct and straight with people. And even though a lot of my friends never even heard of lupus, they're obviously more mature now, and they're able to listen and understand, even if it sounds abstract and something that they never heard before. So yes, sometimes there's definitely that social anxiety of having to take certain precautions that other people may not have to take. But for me, to ease that, I kind of just bring it out into the open when I first meet someone. Not saying that I just like tell everyone I see, but if I'm getting close to someone or my close friends, I just tell them what I have to deal with. They may see me taking my medication before meals, and that's a good branch into explaining why, and anything else. So that's kind of how I deal with it.
If I could just interject, it is so important that we not be afraid to tell people.
Yeah.
And I think in this day and age, people are a little bit more open to it, just the way society has gone. But if you want people to understand, it is critical that we tell. Unfortunately, I was never one that suffered from peer pressure or anything like. I didn't care what others thought of me. Like, I mean, I did a lot of unmanly things in terms of, like, I do a lot of sewing, I do a lot of knitting, I do all that kind of stuff. I like to be indoors, so that was not what the guys did, but I didn't care. Like, so it did, for me, it wasn't difficult to say, I've got this. Of course, back then too, it was relatively new, but nobody knew what it was. And so here I am with something really new and novel that nobody knows about, right? So that was kind of different, but it's so important that people understand where you're coming from. And if if there's an outdoor activity or picnicking plan, just say, I'm sorry, I can't go, and this is why.
Miguel, so you said you graduated about 2 years ago. So how did you find
2021.
that? Yeah. How did you find that going through, post-secondary? And did you find, like, kind of what Isaac was saying, people had matured and it was easier to have those conversations with your peers?
Going through university, I'm a bit more extroverted now, but I'm very much an introvert. So I didn't tell anybody. I never said anything. They just knew. Like, I was very fortunate that at the university I went to, they did have accommodations for people with illness. So all they really knew was that Miguel did his exam somewhere else, really.
Right.
But it was difficult to voice it. I never really did. It probably would have been healthier if I did, but being who I am and who I was then, I did not say anything. No.
Yeah, because now, like, what we see from you is you're quite vocal, and which is, I'm glad that you're able to get to that point now.
Yeah. Just a bit later in my life.
Yeah. Hey, everybody has their own path, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So am I aware we kind of geared off?
We have Carlos.
Carlos, yeah. So how does lupus impact your family and home life?
Well, I think because each day can be unpredictable, and it's hard to make plans with the family, and suddenly you have to not cancel, but tell your family that you're not feeling well. Physical limitation is always something that can put a strain on the family members, especially when it's hard to explain what you're going through during the flares, right? Also, the emotional part, the emotional impact of the illness can cause also anxiety, because you're trying to learn more about lupus, and your family also tries to learn about lupus, but it's so, like I said before, it's so extensive that you cannot say, oh, okay, this is going to happen this day, or so that can cause anxiety sometimes. Even thinking about the future, especially with my wife, who has been. I'm glad everybody said that they have great support, and I can say exactly the same. She's been outstanding and loving and caring. But I also understand that your family members also feel the same kind of emotional pain and stress, right? They take caregiving responsibilities which they had not planned before. Even in my case, thank God my wife helps me with putting all my medications together, and she does it every week, and I don't know how I would do without her, but and probably in a less priority, but also it's a challenge in the family, the financial stress, especially to cover medications. In my case, if we didn't have insurance, it would be impossible. I take blood thinners because in other medications to help me out with the symptoms. So I'm always thinking, if I lose my job, or if I didn't have my wife's benefits, thinking about the future in retiring. It's so that's really a group of different emotions and feelings that can be stressful for the entire family. But the support and love, that helps you go through all that.
I'm so glad, as you say, Carlos, to hear that everyone here has that support. And I know you talked about something that's really important and something that we are advocating for, and we will not stop. And that is to ensure that, all Canadians living with lupus have equitable access to care and treatment. And I don't take that lightly because, I know Carrie can definitely speak to it, but there's so many folks that are doing very well on certain medications, and when they maybe graduate from school or lose a job or retire, there's not that coverage, and that's we need to ensure that there is that coverage. I know Carrie's been working diligently to try and share that messaging and change things, as are we. We are constantly advocating for that. I'm constantly speaking with different elected officials across Canada. As you imagine, it's sort of the same sort of answer, but we won't stop until that is the case. And as we see with the two new, Benlysta isn't necessarily new. It was out in 2011, but it's been approved by Health Canada for SLE and lupus nephritis. But CADTH has recommended it for listing for lupus nephritis. And one of our challenges is, why only lupus nephritis? If it's approved by Health Canada for SLE, it should be approved for that as well.
Exactly.
We're continuing that. I hate to say fight, but we're continuing that fight. Just as, we're looking at Safnella, which is a treatment from AstraZeneca Pharmaceuticals, and it's the same thing. It's been approved for SLE by Health Canada and recommended by CADTH for listing. And these are important months because we want to make sure that all the provinces recommend them for listing. So over the next number of months, that's something that Lupus Canada will be actively working on with the pharma companies to ensure that everybody has equitable access to those. And when I say that, I mean that they can get those and they don't have to worry about losing a job or, retiring or whatever that case may be. We want to make sure that everyone has equal access. So sorry, I didn't mean to go on about that, but that's one of the things that one of the things we're definitely working towards, and it's a big thing, but it's an extremely important piece. So yeah, the next question I had, and some of you have touched on it a little bit, but we're kind of getting an idea of how long did it take you to be diagnosed, and what symptoms do you find that now you experience most? Maybe Miguel, how long, do you remember how long it took roughly? Like, I'm always interested to hear from folks how long that took.
So it was in grade 5 is when I got really, really sick. And I was, so grade 5 to grade 8. So 3 years.
Yeah.
3 years. Yeah.
What is it that you find sort of on a daily basis that you experience the most?
The story of my entire life has been chronic fatigue. That is like the main one. Like once a month or so, I'll probably once or twice a month I'll come into work and like memory fog is like throws me off for at least 2 hours in the morning. So that's like off and on. Joint pain, headaches, migraines. So those are the main ones.
Yeah. How about you, Isaac? What do you remember? I can't remember how long it was for your diagnosis. It seems like it was about the same amount of time, about 3 years, if I'm not correct.
Yeah, I was just speaking to my friends about it. I was roughly grade 4 when I got really sick, and then it took up until grade 9. It was like
5 years.
Yeah, about 4 to 5 years. In grade 9 was when, it was just like around the beginning of high school that I really started to feel like we had a somewhat control on it, and I was able to be with going to school and everything.
What symptoms do you find you most experience that now?
So now it's more, I can get headaches, joint pain, but I try and first of all, I love being very active, just the type of person I am. So if I'm going to the gym, I'll limit things like running or anything with high impact because I know my joints will flare. So I continue to swim, and stuff like that. Try and drink a lot of water for the headaches. I also definitely experience fatigue, especially when it's linked to the sun. So sometimes if I'm playing a sport for a few hours outside, even though I'll be fully protected, it's when I stop, like when I come home, it's like I can't even move. Like I have to immediately take a nap, and I'm almost out of it till the next day. So I'd say fatigue is something I experience now, but I'm definitely grateful that it's generally managed because during the diagnosis phase, I'd wake up and I'd be so sore, like I couldn't. My mom used to tell me she couldn't even like touch a bed sheet onto my body because it was that painful, and I just wouldn't be able to move out of my bed the whole day. And not only, and it's easier to deal with something even though it can be that extreme when you know what's happening, right? And because it was such a long process, they thought I had everything under the sun, and they were testing for it. And it was almost worse that we didn't know. So now that we do know, if anything comes up, I just go straight to attacking it and protect my health.
And I think that really speaks to, we're seeing the sort of length to diagnosis. I'm noticing over the last number of years it is shortening. Why are we getting better at diagnosing it? Are we more aware of it? I don't know what that is, but I think as you said, Isaac, once you are diagnosed, there's like what I hear from people, there's almost a little bit of a sense of relief because, okay, we know what it is. We know how we're going to deal with this. There's going to be times where, it's going to be, sort of working through the meds and the dosage, but knowing what it is gives that sort of sense of relief. How about you, Carlos? Because you were diagnosed in 2018. So how long did it take for you to be diagnosed?
Well, my case is a little strange because I was being treated for other things. And now that I look back, I don't know if lupus was the cause of those problems. Because originally they were treating me for my thyroid, and they gave me medications and felt some kind of relief until they removed my thyroid. But the other problems or symptoms continued. So it was a long process just to, going to the doctor. They were finding, the blood test, some abnormalities, and one, it was I don't I don't call it gladly, but I went to the hospital, and suddenly I was fainting every day, and I went to the hospital, and they said it was something like a flu. And then they did endoscopy. They perform X-rays, and for an entire week I was fainting every single day until it was on a Saturday that I couldn't walk, and I couldn't breathe as well.
Wow.
So I went to the hospital. Fortunately, back home, I have friends who are also doctors. My mother is a medical doctor, and they recommended me to, when they heard the symptoms, they immediately told me, go to the hospital and tell them that you might have a clot. And because it was, the symptoms were there, swollen leg, hardened skin, and it was red and hurt. So when they performed the scan, they found 4 clots in my lung,
Oh, wow.
in a 6 inches long clot in my right leg. So it really was a miracle, and that's how I describe it, really, because and it was then when they direct me to a specialist, and he immediately told me, you have lupus. And I think it's important to mention that in the process of being diagnosed, you would expect some kind of direction or some kind of more information. And I understand the work of a doctor. It's not always easy. But to be honest, the way I was told is that you have lupus, you can die from it. And that's exactly how I was told. And he said you can die from it, and so you're going to start with blood thinners, and that was it. That was all the information I got. And I came back home. I told my wife. We didn't understand what it was. So the feeling of being diagnosed for me wasn't a relief. It just opened a door of questions and what then, right?
Was it a general practitioner that said that?
It was a hematologist.
Really? Oh my gosh. That's just horrible.
Yeah, that was, and again, it took a while for me to understand and to learn. I knew about lupus, because we had in the family a close friend that had lupus, and she did well, all her life, but I didn't understand the illness. So again, being diagnosed, probably for some people is a relief, but for me, it just it wasn't. It just created more anxiety.
Yeah, lack of information and direction. That's just, that's horrible to hear. And I'm sorry that you had to experience that, because then you have to go looking for the information yourself, which you shouldn't have to do. Doctors should be, well armed with this information to provide you where to go to get that information.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah. Wow. Carrie, what have been some of your most recent symptoms? And how long was your term to diagnosis?
I'm gonna make the other guys jealous. About 4 weeks from the onset of symptoms until I was probably discharged from the hospital. Having said that, though, the symptoms were so severe. Like I said, I had laid out on the sun for weeks, right? And so when, I'm on an island in the middle of Lake Nipissing and the rash starts coming out, they thought I was into the poison ivy and like all kinds of stuff. Anyway, it got so severe over the next few weeks that they truly told my parents a couple of times, if he makes it through the night, he'll be fine. So even though, it was a short period of time, it wasn't without being fraught with other anxieties and that and of course I didn't know anything about this, and a lot of times I didn't know anything about it until years later when my parents told me what had gone on. And there was weeks in the summers that I just totally miss. I don't have any recollection of them at all. For me, my symptoms typically will be the fatigue, like everyone else, the wacky blood counts that will go all over the place, and the joints. Now for me, that's complicated with the fact that I have osteoarthritis. So that with the avascular necrosis together required that I have 2 hip replacements and all kinds of stuff, right? So, but that's usually it. Now, having said that, I really haven't experienced any symptoms for quite some time. In fact, full disclosure here, in terms of the medication, I've been on Benlysta for 8 years. And I started on it at 30 milligrams a day of prednisone, and now I'm down to 4. So, and of course, over 8 years, and that was the desire, using the Benlysta, was to get me off of the steroids, because the steroids are really, prednisone has been the only thing that's worked for me. All of the other treatment modalities, for one reason or another, didn't agree with the rest of my body. So that was really all I'm left without the Benlysta, and so that's why it's so critical that we push for these types of things to be available, because I'm sure I'm not the only one out there where the other treatments have failed, and the one that you're left with has just as many long-term and short-term horrible side effects. So I was fortunate in terms of I didn't have that lingering over years. However, it was pretty severe. Like I said, I told my mom and dad, if he makes it through the night, he'll be fine.
Wow. So our next question is, what type of support would you like to see available? And as a man, are you comfortable seeking additional support? Or do you find that difficult? Maybe we'll start with Miguel.
I think I would more accommodations. Like I'm good now, but I wish there was more for like I wish there was more to help me stay good, if that makes any sense. I feel like there's support once I am at a state where I'm not good, like things are really bad. But like things like flexible work schedules, like I find you hear a lot of people with lupus, they're like, I'm happy to hear it, but like people that have an employer that is accommodating for them and giving flexible schedules.
That's an interesting point, that there's support when you're really sick, but what support, what accommodations can there be to help you to stay well, right? So I
just thought about something like, I have a certain amount of vacation days. Those are my days off for the year. But I would argue that I would need more days off than someone that doesn't have an illness. But that doesn't exist where I work or anywhere that I've worked. But more of a preventative, proactive approach would be great. Yeah, I think.
Yeah. No, that's a very good point.
If I need something, I ask for it. And there are things out there, for, the setting I worked at, if I didn't get an accommodation, there'd be a grievance filed and they'd lose it, because that's human rights, right? So there are some things like that. I would really, at this point in my life, I would really like to see a lot more support from the government, particularly on the medication sides. And that's because these newer drugs. They're the first new ones in 50 years. There have not been anything. And I mean, and some of the drug treatments we have weren't even developed for lupus, right? Hydrochloroquine, that was for malaria. So there's all of this stuff, and just the anti-inflammatories that looked after the symptoms and don't actually look at the heart of the disease, right? So I would like to see a lot more support from the government in terms of look at, this is the first time they've actually had something specific for lupus in 50 years. And so that's where I would, and as Leanne has alluded to, I've been advocating with government and with pharmacies and all over the place, and apparently some of my rattling chains has helped, but still it's going to be a long process, and I don't understand why government agencies are contradicting one another. Health Canada says this drug is fine for use for treating lupus, and Canada says, oh no, it's not, so we don't fund it, right? So and that's the point I'm trying to make with the government, is what is this inconsistency in terms of your approval process? Like, this doesn't make sense.
Things are definitely, I can provide a little insight. I find that things with CADITH are changing. They are more interested in hearing the patient voice than they ever were.
Okay, good, because I actually wrote to the person.
Yes.
The director.
And in my years with Lupus Canada, I've seen quite the change, and just in the last year or so.
Okay.
So that leaves me quite hopeful, and also that there are quite a number of other pharma companies that have lupus-specific drugs in the pipeline, whether they're in clinical trial stage 2 or 3 or whatever it is. And I have not seen that in a long time. So it's more and more prevalent through the pharmaceutical companies.
I think there's going to be enough pressure on the government that they've got to do something, right? And
I think by having both Saphnelo and Benlysta, at the same time, and us, really getting on CADITH about it, that hopefully
and the Rheumatology Association and
absolutely,
and the patient support group. So anyway, I think if we have the government that will at least recognize that this problem, and we will help supply the treatment for it somehow, I mean, then that might have some kind of a trickle-down effect in terms of support, although healthcare in Canada is in a bit of a shambles right now all around. But, that might help in terms of awareness and not have the situation that the other gentleman had in terms of, being told something and it's not right and going for years and not getting information, right, about when you are diagnosed.
Yeah, exactly.
Isaac, do you have anything additional that you want to add?
I think there are a lot of good points made. Definitely support in prevention and maintenance versus treating what's happening, because like what was mentioned, for example, even at school, when I'm seeking support in terms of having to miss class for appointments, or in case of a flare, the medical offices have told me, sorry, we can't consider you a student with a disability or a condition, because it's not something that I can say this happens to me at these times, or when this happened, or this happens to me every day, or this is what physical impediments I live with. On a day-to-day basis, I may look perfectly healthy, but if I were to have a flare-up on the day of an exam, or when I'm really stressed at school, like, it would just take me out for weeks, and they wouldn't be able to understand that or accommodate that. So I think that comes through just simply awareness as well. The more people that understand the disease, they're more likely to be like, well, lupus is different, we have to accommodate because we don't know what can happen when, and things like that. I don't know, I feel like my doctors were, they were amazing. My diagnosis period was very long, and I felt like they were testing for everything. And looking back on it, I almost wonder why it wasn't considered sooner, just because, my mom has it, and I'm just assuming that's because it was just something that was so rare in men, and just in general for people to know about. So, just getting rid of the whole men-woman thing and just saying it's a disease, and it can happen to anyone, and it should be considered, and people should be informed about it regardless of who might have it.
Yeah, very good points, Isaac. And one thing that Lupus Canada will be doing in the fall is we're going to be holding a information session with general practitioners, nurse practitioners, and a different level of group of folks, so that we can educate them more on what lupus is, what the signs and symptoms are, and we will be working with rheumatologists to present that, because rheumatologists are becoming overwhelmed because a lot of rheumatologists have left the system, especially after COVID. And we're, as you guys can all see, it's very difficult to get into a rheumatologist. There's a long wait time, and we want to make sure that people are being diagnosed quickly, timely, and that they are able to see a rheumatologist in a timely fashion. But we've got to start at the core and make sure they're educated well enough about what those signs and symptoms are, and putting those pieces of a puzzle together and understanding them.
I think if you're experiencing any type of illness, the patient is the most interested person in learning about the illness. I should say that we talked about most of the help needed, but I have to stress the medical support, and that includes access to healthcare professional who can not only diagnose but can also treat lupus. As I mentioned, I was given a diagnosis, but throughout these 4 years, it's been very little information that I have received in terms of educating me about lupus. So it made me just do my own research, and that has sometimes, it's pro and cons, because you can find wrong information and you start panicking, and so I think that type of support is very important, and learn how to manage the symptoms. Emotional support is very important, not only for you but also for the family. Style support, you to get ideas how to deal with with your diet. So dietitians, nutritionists, and sometimes you don't know that you need this type of support. Like I said, I had to learn about legal support. Is very important. Kerry was mentioning something very important, which I brought my attention, which is the human right aspect of an illness. I don't know anything. Like I still think that I cannot tell my employer, I cannot attend to this activity because I'm afraid I will be fired, or I will be put in a special file, and sum up, okay, he took off this day. Even if, like I think Miguel mentioned, you would require more than your 15 days of vacations to treat your symptoms, right? Financial support, we talked about it, and I'm glad you guys have are being proactive to get that type of support. And of course, the workplace, accommodating your needs to flexible hours, and also I would like to see employers have like a resource for just to learn the basics of people with lupus. I know for an employer it's a challenge to learn about all this, right? But at least you can refer them to this might help you to your human resources area, and tell them here's some information about my condition. Right?
Based on your lived experience, what advice do you have for men newly diagnosed with lupus? And what do you wish people in general understand about a man living with lupus?
You know what? Educate. First of all, I would tell a gentleman, and it was just referred to. Educate. Like, find out. They're not going to. I had a doctor. The first rheumatologist I was referred to way back when, I was asking about my drugs I was on, and he threw a pamphlet at me and said, "Read this, and if you've got any further questions, ask me." That was when I decided I need to find another doctor. So educate yourself. And just as an example of that, when I was doing some schooling, and even my wife, when she was doing some schooling, we had the opportunity to write papers. For our assignments, we had the opportunity to write papers. And so writing about lupus fit into the curriculum that we were doing. So we were educating ourselves about that. And of course, I was working at a hospital, and so I had access to all the journals and that kind of stuff, which helped. But so educate yourself. The other thing is don't be afraid to let people know what your diagnosis is and what your limitations are. And that includes your employers, and that, because they, by law, they have to accommodate, right? And they cannot fire you unless it presents undue hardship on the organization. And that is really difficult. Like, that is very, very difficult for them to prove that this is an undue hardship, that our organization can no longer survive if Carlos or Miguel or Isaac are not there. So advocate for yourself, let people know, educate yourself. And there are lots of reliable medical websites out there, including Lupus Canada's information that's there, but PubMed, the Lupus Foundation of America, like, there's lots of good organizational websites out there that can help to educate ourselves and others.
Probably the first and foremost advice, or I would say, is that lupus does not define you as a person. Because, I've gone through periods of the disease, of the illness, that, I felt guilty. I felt disappointed of myself, because I used to do this. I used to be able to do this, and now I cannot do that, and it brought a sense of not being a good father, a good husband, or a good employee. The best advice I can tell someone, don't make the illness define who you are. And of course, like Carrie said, be proactive. Just learn about lupus. Have relationship with others that have lupus or who advocate for lupus. That not only brings a sense of a community and support, but also helps you to it's a resource of information. When you are in contact with people that are experiencing the same thing, they can be a very good resource of information. I was not only surprised, but I was amazed and blessed to be invited by you guys, and now that I know Miguel, Carrie, and Isaac, it's a blessing. Just hearing, what they went through, and I said, my God, I experienced the same, right? And just
sometimes sharing is so cathartic, right?
And it can be life changing. So you're not alone, right?
I think just, especially when you're young, it can be intimidating, and, you may try and brush things off. Just, try to keep it to yourself. But obviously sometimes, or a lot of the time, lupus onset is very severe. And just don't be afraid to ask questions to your doctors, your family. And, I think self-educating and educating the people around you is very important, as it was mentioned, because, it may have to get to the stage where people may be experiencing these things and doctors may not know what's going on. And you can say, what if it's lupus? And this is what I know. And and if we both don't know, then it's definitely something we can consider to reduce, the long diagnosis periods. And then like Carlos was saying, once you know and understand what's going on, you don't let it define you, and you keep striving to be the person you want to be, and based on the path that you need to take to manage it. So,
well, I really have to, express my gratitude to every one of you. I hope you found this to be helpful, enlightening. I know I definitely have. Listening to all of you, I just keep jotting down things because I'm, thinking of all these ideas and ways that we can better support you. And this is just the beginning for us, but it's an important step that we're taking. And thank you ever so much for sharing your stories, sharing your thoughts and opinions with us. And we're here, and we will be in touch because I'm sure we have lots of other questions and some other opportunities in which we could definitely benefit from your input and advice. So, and we're here. You guys all have my email. If you need anything, I'm here. I'm an email away. So I really appreciate all of your time. And thank you. Thank you ever so much. And I'm glad that everyone's doing well right now.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice meeting you all.
Yep.
Nice.
Take care. Bye.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.